Hey everybody, and welcome back to the season finale of
Film Freaks.
Film Freaks.
You had a Paul moment there.
I did. Where's
So many
my
shows.
mind?
We get lost.
I know. We just did another show too. So
Where
we're
is my
tired.
mind?
All right. Anyway, here we go. We're going to be talking about the for the season finale of Film Freaks. I decided that we're going to do a movie that's very sort of been popular from the 80s that a lot of people know. I mean, most people know this movie. Even Gen Z probably knows this movie, I would hope. Yeah. If their parents are raising them right. And it's this 1980, I want to say 7 or 8 or 6. In that time frame. 1988 film, Big. Uh-oh. Big. You can't really see it. It's not that big.
Yep.
I'm sure that will be said a few times.
Kind of big.
Kind of big. We're going to have to, next on the next one, we'll have to,
Yeah, it was right when Tom Hanks was probably at his highest profile.
Yes. And so, at the highest, but he's still very, very high. So, we'll get into some stuff about him. But we'll be back to talk to you more about it after you watch our little intro.
Yep.
Till then, everybody. Bye. We are back, and it was a fun show. Like it was fun to watch.
I like how you look over my way more.
Paul is different. Paul has a different sense of humor, different kind of feelings about it. I think we're all both younger than him, or something.
Yeah.
Are you older?
No,
Or, nope,
younger.
you're younger. So we're all younger than him. So
Yeah, I was like 20 when this came out in the theater. So, I went and saw it, but I was into a lot different kinds of movies at 20 years old.
See, I was like 15, so
And,
I was almost right in that wheelhouse of this one, in that 12 to 15 area.
I was
and
6.
and there's a lot of throwback in this to some of the older films, like that whole dancing sequence. That's like a Shirley Temple kind of thing,
Sing, I like Singing in the Rain or Shirley Temple, this type of thing.
But see, you don't like that kind of stuff.
Classic. Yeah, classic sort of stuff from those days.
Yeah. So, anywho,
Yeah, I'm more the new wave stuff that came in the 60s and 70s.
So yeah, I grew up on this. My parents used to have it on Betamax, like we recorded it or whatever, and I would watch it all the time. And
Betamax.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad movie. It's a good movie, and I'm glad I saw it. It's
Again,
nice.
because you've seen it before, and you said you liked it before, but
and I had never seen the extended cut.
right. And we watched the extended cut, so we watched the version that's a little. I think it was like 2 hours and 5 minutes, or like 20 minutes longer.
And it's still a good movie. It's just I've scratched that itch now, and I probably won't.
You probably won't ever watch it again unless there's somebody else that
really
has you watch it again.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't watch the extended cut again. It is a little long, and there's scenes that I'm okay. Like it.
Yeah, you can understand why they weren't included.
Yeah,
it's like his buddy. The family scene with his buddy at dinner and all.
Yeah, the dinner
seeing that he
scene.
doesn't have the greatest home life. It's like I sort of understood that anyways. Getting
like,
that extra context, I guess, is kind of neat, but it's good trim.
Especially since like the kid goes in and out of like going to his friends in New York, and then comes back home and then goes back, and like his parents don't seem to care, or whatever.
And I guess part of the reason why I like a movie like Splash, which is kind of similar, more than this, is I guess just because this is 13-year-old kids, and I don't really have an interest in 13-year-old kids, whereas he's an adult who's kind of with a more kid-like creature in Daryl Hannah's character, but is not a kid.
Yeah, she just doesn't
She's
know
just an
human
innocent.
behavior.
Yeah.
she doesn't understand being a human.
There's really no kids in that movie at all.
And you mentioned before like Mannequin, and that's sort of a similar thing of like she was a wooden thing. She was an inanimate object, and she becomes human, you know, and she has to.
Didn't she have some?
Pinocchio.
There was like some background thing with Mannequin, though. I think.
Yeah.
There, that she was some Egyptian, I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen that.
It's
one,
like
but-
Pinocchio, you know, comes to life or whatever, and has to.
Yeah, and again,
human.
this is just a different era. You don't have really innocent 13-year-olds anymore. That trope is dead.
I don't know. I mean, I
These
don't
days?
think they're as innocent, but maybe there's still kids that like. I mean, back when I was growing up, yeah, more so, and maybe I grew up in the last like era before the internet blew up, right? Because like my high school, we started getting the internet.
Yeah, but it's even before the internet. It's more like drugs and violence and sex. I mean, you ever see the movie 13?
Yeah.
That would be an interesting double shot to see that and 13 next to each other to see
Sounds
how
terrible.
far society has changed, and maybe kids in between that, because that would have come before 13.
13 and yeah, and
You know,
kids
like I
and-
said, this is more of like an idealized version of 13 versus the real world of 13-year-olds.
I think
You know,
when I was 12, 13, thinking back, I mean, I think of it in more of an innocent standpoint, sort of, because I mean, it was almost identical to my age. So for me, it's like this movie helps remind me of being a kid.
so you were saying you were like 15 when this came out?
Yeah,
So you were closer.
Yeah, it was really close within a few years. So time wise in the 80s, and just it being a new and current event is kind of within a couple years to me. So I mean, it kind of hits kind of at home, and it kind of makes me harken back to that. And to me now, it's more of a nostalgic feel, obviously, but it's like it kind of makes me think of it of the world through an innocent thing. And you see in this movie how he transforms from his innocence, and he starts having responsibilities and stuff like that. And it's like, I wish I harken back to sometimes I wish I had those days of innocence and stuff like that. I wouldn't want to necessarily go back permanently for that, but
Well,
that
even-
innocence is very special of who you are to
Even
me,
the
anyways.
girl said that.
It's-
Like she wouldn't want to be a kid again.
Yeah.
She wouldn't want to. She'd gone through that
Yeah,
already.
exactly.
I'm
She's-
more like her. If I went back, it wouldn't be because I missed the innocent times. It'd be more like, now I know better, and I can handle situations with the knowledge I've got now and handle things better because I'm an adult. You know, an adult for me was far better than being a kid.
I would
Yeah.
I would think back if I was able to do something like that now and go back to that point. And I know with the mindset that I have now, yes, there's the innocence factor that I would have, but at that time, but I would think of it from an adult standpoint of being able to see the people that are no longer with me, like my dad or relatives and stuff like that, and I would treasure those moments even more because it's something that I can't have now.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think we're starting to venture into like time traveling type
Yeah.
things almost.
And things like, you know, it all kind of depends. Like if you have control of, say, you know you can go back whenever you want, it's kind of a
Yeah.
different
But see,
thing.
that wasn't the idea of this movie. This movie
Right.
wasn't going back to being a kid. This was being a kid and
coming
becoming
forward.
an adult
Right.
and realizing how shitty sort of,
Well,
you know, because
I wouldn't say shitty, but it's definitely more complicated than he thinks.
Well, I don't know. I guess for him it was lucky.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
everything sort of worked out in his favor.
And he,
With
everything.
He sort of ignored the ignorance, to be honest, in a lot of ways. I mean, he's like, well, they did this they were bad, or he just sort of shrugged it off. Lovett's character was just sort of like he was just like, with that, whatever. And then but until he got hit by John Hurt's character, and then it was just like he started to question.
I mean,
some
who
things.
was the kid there? I mean, John Hurt's character was
Exactly.
such a kid.
Exactly?
Yeah, he
a
acted like a
shitty
kid
kid,
too,
yeah.
but like he was an actual
Bully.
grown up
Mhm.
who all of a sudden, you know, sort of he had gone through all the actual phases to become a grown up, and that he still acted like a bigger child than the child who was a child and just all of a sudden became a grown up. So like when they get into their little fights, or he fights with his girlfriend, you know, or whatever she is to him, you know, sleeping buddy, you know, or whatever. That was it. Like that's all they did was like he was just all of a sudden like
It's-
always argumentative.
I don't know whether you saw it, but there's an interesting Star Trek Next Generation
I haven't watched that.
show where the crew goes through something and they all get transported back to being kids. And now they have to solve all these problems, except, they're in the bodies of 12, 13-year-old kids, but they have their memories and stuff. But they run into all these problems because they can't physically do the things that they could do before, even though they know in their heads what they can do. And it was pretty interesting, and just some of them kind of point out how horrible it was that they were kids, and others were like, wow, this is great, I get to be a kid again. And it was very interesting how different characters do it differently.
And so in this situation, I bet a bunch of different kids, some kids would want to be grown-ups, I bet that his buddy Billy would love to be a grown-up, would have, but the kid who sort of, even though he said, I wish I were big, really what he was wanting was tall enough to ride that ride. Remember, that was the reason he did that, was because he couldn't ride the ride. The girl didn't see him like that.
He should have said, I wish I was bigger.
Yeah. Or I wish I was
taller.
15 or something like that, where it's a different age and different thing. He said big, and technically it could have made him like a blimp,
That's a whole big, that's a whole Aladdin type of thing. That whole complex. It's like you rub the genie and get 3 wishes. What is your real wish?
Buddy really cut it right to the chase, though, when he says, you couldn't have wished for $1 million? Because that's really what, if you had the chance to wish, I think most of us would have done that.
That
because
was actually cut.
Who cares?
That line.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Because it makes more sense.
Because it makes sense for the movie. So I get why they brought it back, but it was weird. Like some of the stuff was cut, and it felt weird that I re-looked at it. I was like, oh.
Because think about it this way: he learns a very, very different lesson if he gets like $1 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But see, it also goes back to the theme of every one of these kind of movies. Be careful what you wish for. Because even though he wished to be big, all of a sudden he's stuck in this world that he didn't want to be in.
Although
he
never
managed
to surf through it pretty easily.
Yeah, like we said, it's not like he had a job like working as a waiter and he had to learn how to do that all the way, work his way up to being, the toy person or whatever.
He was physically and operationally making it in the world, but mentally he truly wasn't, because when complications started to rise, his immaturity.
And his lack of knowledge.
It's interesting because you could have made a very, very serious film about kids who are in reality forced to work jobs and be adults when they're not prepared to do that. That's a very different film.
I don't know if that would be a fun film.
No, it wouldn't. Be a very dark film.
Be a very dark, kind of sad film.
But you could make that film. And that's like a mirror opposite of this film.
It's a real, it's a more real life adventure. Right. This is a fantasy. And this is the fantasy idea of, and this goes to all those different movies. Like, also, there's that Adam Sandler movie, Click, where he gets that remote. I've said this before the movie Click came out. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if Universal Remote, where you could pause, your day, and you could rewind or you could fast forward, and then they
remote.
show this into the movie, and it gets dark. It goes really disturbing because of the fact that you don't want that. No. You don't want that opportunity to, you want those memories. You want those, the journey is the more fun part.
The bad things in your life are actually teachable moments.
Exactly.
You don't know that when you're younger, especially.
Or even when you're an adult, you still don't want that, maybe. When you're grieving, you don't want that. But those grieving moments and those moments in there are things that you go through in order to become an adult, in order to grow up. And
right. There are no shortcuts.
Exactly. And so when they show you a shortcut, what happened in that movie, which was pretty cool, was, because I bet you never saw it because it's Adam Sandler, but what happens is basically it ends up being TiVo, where it knows exactly what you fast forward through. So every time, if you're like, oh, let me fast forward through this boring sex thing or whatever, also every sex thing you do is boring.
No, it's usually commercials. That's what people.
Yeah, well, anyway, the point is things that you're not really that excited about, you could be still excited about it for whatever, and then it's just it's all these things, and all of a sudden he's like, I want my life. I want to just, be able to live my life exactly the way I'm supposed to live.
And and it is. It's the opposite of what it is in reality, because in reality you can't go back or be a kid and go forward. If you are a kid and you're pushed forward, it's generally because it's something horrible has happened to you, and you are put in a situation that you were
forced.
not prepared.
Well, I think that's why they took this movie in the light. And I know it's Hollywood, so they tried, but they didn't go into the dark things of Social Security number and all the complications that could have made that he could have had to face, because the message of the movie wasn't about any of that. The message of the movie was about him as a kid. In the overarching theme of it was him as a kid. Don't wish for things. Let life be what it is and enjoy and grow with yourself.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And all those other things could have been complications. And yeah, the cynical part of us could say, well, this doesn't seem realistic because of ABC. And I think that's us watching it from an adult mindset versus us trying to watch it as a kid's mindset or a teenage. And that's why when I watch movies sometimes I try to...
different context too. I mean, I think about my mom. My mom grew up in the 30s and her parents died young. So she was 15 years old and had to raise her brothers and go and work at 15 because she had to. They had no choice back then. There was nobody else there. So this is a situation where she didn't really have that sort of childhood that you get, and as a teenager, she was forced into a much more adult situation.
Her life
before she
experiences
wanted
and current state of the thing made it different for her.
It helped her later on in life, but it was a shit thing that she had to go through.
Also, I hear from child actors too. Child actors become adults pretty quickly. Like a lot of them learn how to smoke cigarettes from other crew members who are older. So they're looking up to these older guys. Some of them take advantage of these things, and that's why.
And there's a lot of that kind of coming out these days, talking about that.
But the point of my story for that was that like these kids who are kids, they and a lot of people now are like, I don't want my kid to become part of that industry because of them growing up too quickly and stuff, and they want them to just enjoy themselves as a child. I did karate for so many years, and I did for 2 days out of the week I would have to go to karate class. When all my friends were playing ball and having fun and being kids, I had to go do that, right? Which is a sport. And it kind of took my...
I don't even know that you can, though. I mean, I was that generation of kids, that Gen X thing that you famously see all the time, talking about feral kids running around. But it's true. I would vanish for hours and hours all day long. I'd run around and do stuff.
But it was safe.
These days, I mean, it was no safer now than it was then. But these days, you get arrested. You're not watching your kids. I don't know.
It's worse now.
I remember as a kid, and I would go out, and it was like basically... You had to be home before the lights came on for the streets, and it was a safer environment. Now there was times in my childhood that I lived on a military base, and then there was open base, and sometimes it was closed. So it was a different world and a different place. But as a kid, we felt safe, and as my parents were really strong parents, but they trusted that it was a safe environment because it was
they
safe.
were allowed to. You can't even do that.
Nowadays, you can't even let your kid go out in your front yard because something might happen.
No, there are people
stranger danger
calling the cops on parents who just let their kids go off and play.
And that's why it's ridiculous. Like going back and watching movies from the 80s. Plus, it takes conveniences out of the way.
Helicopter parents,
the phones and the computers and all that. There was computers in this, but I like going back and watching movies in different periods because you get to watch it from the context of that time period.
It's a very different time in the 80s.
And this is 80s.
And very different era, very different everything, really.
I mean, if you look at movies like Goonies, 1985, they're all riding their bikes going all around the place.
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me, they were walking to find a dead body.
To find a dead body on the train tracks. You do that today?
Now that has a darker element to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen King wrote the original story for it, so it makes sense. Yeah. But we were supposed to do Stand By Me for Film Freaks with Liz, and hopefully we still do at some point. I'm sure we will.
That's a great one to do.
You know what? We'll bring you on that for that. There's going to be a Zoom sometime, so we'll do that next year.
Yeah. But it does bring up a lot of interesting questions that I hadn't thought of before, like if Elizabeth Perkins' character had the opportunity to go back with him, and she says no, even though she can't really do that. It just works for him. But
we don't know. We don't know that she's never tried it. So maybe it
Yeah.
would
It was
work
that,
for her.
that unknown MacGuffin of really what happened. But to me,
I get the feeling it's just for him.
Yeah, but
Why?
But
Because it's for his thing to learn.
but for me, that's the you could go into any fantasy, sci-fi, non-realistic type of environment, movie, and sort of criticize. And for me, I just sort of chalk it up, saying, okay, let's dismiss that and just watch it for what it is.
Yeah, it would be an interesting alternative, but I don't think it would work as well.
No, because she's already been through this, and she even said it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they went in for that kiss right towards the end, and it was like, and she moved up to the forehead, it was just like that was a perfect touch.
Good.
Because if she wouldn't have done that, then she would have been kissing,
Yeah.
knowingly kissing
Right.
somebody that's really 13-year-old
13.
internally. Then that opens a whole different can of worms.
Whole different can of worms there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you're right about that, because it was like, because most people would say, oh, she had sex with a 13-year-old, and that's really gross, and it is, it's disgusting, but she didn't know.
Right, it's the Oedipus thing.
Yeah.
You don't know until you know, and then when you
And
know,
once you know,
Yeah.
what do you do with that knowledge?
If anything, he would need the not because he was with her, but from the entire experience, he'd have to talk to somebody probably.
Yeah, a therapist. You think?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I
I
mean,
don't
how do you
think
explain to a therapist? I'm
he's-
really a 13-year-old.
I don't think he's going to tell his mom that. I think he's going to tell his mom a bunch of bullshit about he was, taken, but now he's okay, and don't worry about it.
Yeah, or I don't know what happened.
I
or
mean, we
something.
don't know. They don't show that. There's no need to show that.
Yeah, and I think with this, exactly, for this movie, it wasn't necessary to go into that, because to me it's a fantasy film, and it's just you enjoy. And for me, watching it, I was like, oh, this reminds me of so much innocence and stuff like that, and it disregards the day-to-day grind that we go
Yeah,
through in life.
Well, okay, the innocence though.
As an adult, I
in the
think.
beginning of the movie, it shows like we show New York in a very like disgusting, and we were even like going, "Oh my God, this is the New York I remember in
the
1980s."
80s,
and then you see like,
Well, you were thinking Jason was going to walk up the street or something.
yeah, it looked like
Basket case. is what I was thinking.
you were thinking basket case. I was thinking Jason Takes Manhattan, and it looked like that or whatever. And then you get in there, you get the motel or hotel or whatever, and it's this crummy little thing run by the guy who might or might not have
Been involved.
Kills
been
Nancy
involved in a
Spungen, yeah.
murder and in real life, and then all of a sudden, he's in this really crummy hotel, and
he's curled up.
he's curled up and scared and everything, and that was the beginning of like breaking his innocence. Like that was his innocence is still there, but it's like he's now this is the start of him like going on a journey to become like an adult or whatever, or at least live in an adult world. And he discovers later he can just look in the want ads and see computers. He's he's had 4 years of computer experience and does know certain computers, and he starts working for Macmillan Toys and everything.
Yeah, we can scrub around some of that stuff because it is a fantasy. It's just
Right.
some of
So
it's not really believable.
I mean, it wasn't, but
Like
it was the
13-year-old kids doing songs from the late 50s and early 60s. Probably not. Probably
I don't
not.
know.
That was just to get that little link to say that they were.
That's Penny Marshall.
Yeah.
That's what that's from.
So
That was she liked.
She might have had something with one of her friends or
I
something.
don't know. And Spielberg and Gary Ross wrote it, so I don't know if they were like if that was their big thing. But it was probably, as Joe said, it was probably the link so that he could say, okay, how do I prove to my friend how let me do that song. If they had picked like an 80s song, it wouldn't be as memorable. That song, that Shimmy Shimmy Cocoa Pop, man, I didn't know it from anything other than that movie. I've never listened to it in the 50s or 60s.
it's
So it's
out of
iconic
context.
now.
Yeah, now, but it's kind of out of context. I mean, being at that time, I mean, would you have heard it in the 80s? Probably not.
Probably not. But until you watch that movie, then that movie brings
Probably
it
been a
into
Kiss
it.
song or something like that.
Or something Van Halen.
Mid-80s,
Something
that could have gotten the hair bands and stuff.
There you go. You would love that.
Or mid '80s. best 3
Cheap
year stretch.
Trick.
Best 3 year stretch of music in my opinion.
Is Guns N' Roses around then?
No,
probably?
that was later.
That was
Guns N'
later.
Roses, what they were 87, so this was 87, filmed in 87,
88,
88, so it was right
wow.
in
They
that same
they were
vicinity.
kind of big, and then not like early '90s.
Yeah,
and
that's when they hit.
then
second
Nirvana blew them away, and they went away. And that was
Well, they're
fortunate.
still around. They're just not as prevalent, I guess.
Well,
Whatever.
they had a pretty big tour, but this movie, what it just it makes me, it reminds me of seeing films that just it you could see the best dramas and everything like that, and then you see some of these, and it just makes you think of things and watch stuff in different ways.
Yeah.
And in me, if I watch it as a 50-some-year-old guy versus I watch it through the lens of me thinking back, oh, I remember how I was when I was 12 years old and 15 years old in that time period. It's like, oh, all right, yeah, I wish I was a little bit bigger. I remember going to Busch Gardens or whatever, and you couldn't ride the ride because you were just a little bit.
Yep.
Man, I wish I was a little bit taller. Now it's like, I wish I was a little bit thinner, or I wish I was a little bit this, or
Right,
or
like
that.
what would your Zoltar wish be? Let's do that. I
At
like that.
13?
At
Oh
13.
no, right now. What would it be now?
Well, it would be very different now than it would be at 13.
Yeah.
I can tell you
Yeah,
that.
because right now you're thinking of it through the life
But,
experience
all
you
right,
had.
but right now, what would you say? Like, if you went to Zoltar, you could ask for a wish. What would you wish for?
I wish I probably could have experiences with the loved ones that I've lost more. I mean, you could say, well, I wish I had $1 million, or I wish I had this, that make you financially sound for the future. I would wish for something that would give me my innocence of mindset and just love of people that shaped who I am. Have that back one final time, just to embrace it, because now I embrace it within myself, but it's like it gives me an opportunity to thank the people and just be one again with them.
What about you, Paul?
Probably something along the lines of eternal life with no pain, suffering, disease, or death.
Really?
Yeah.
You would want to live forever?
Yeah.
Why?
So I could experience everything.
I'm thinking of the
I get
the Queen
so
song,
bored of
Who wants to live
There's
forever?
A billion things to do for me. I want to see and experience everything.
You still have
I
to
would
pay your
never-
rent.
I would never run out of stuff to do.
You know, you still have to pay your rent. You still have to live your life. You just
I may have
do
to
it forever.
I may have to live forever if I'm going to review all the movies I want to do.
But to me, and each person you should.
Paul goes on 20. Was it 20? 24.
Episode
40.
16,944,000,000,000,000 billion. Yeah.
When I saw this movie in its initial theatrical release 145 years ago,
People will be like, "How did you do that, Zoltar?"
That's right.
what about you?
Careful what you wish for.
That's a good question, because I wouldn't want to live that long. I mean, no, like, you know, I feel like we're here for the certain amount of time that we're here for a reason, and it's the same reason, like, that it sucks that dogs and cats die so young. But like, if you kept every cat and dog that you've ever had, you know, you wouldn't have the next one, right? Like, if you had the first one you ever had for as long as human life, you know,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be
So I guess-
able
I
to
guess thinking
treasure
of
them.
Yeah,
people
but
that
then
I lost, the
by
pets
that
I
same
lost.
coin, you wouldn't need to have more because you'd still have that
Yeah.
one.
But then those other dogs and cats probably wouldn't exist because
Oh, they'd exist, just not with you.
Well, I'd say the three that I've had in my adult life mainly, they've presented different things to me. I mean, it was like the first one was unconditional love. I mean, that was Bijou. Ryder, he was pure happiness, the joy of life, and stuff like that. He taught me that. Gemma, she's a rascal. She's keeping me on edge, stuff like that. So I'm learning different lessons from each one of them. So maybe having different ones are helpful, but the pain of losing them is
that's the worst.
enormous.
So I'd probably wish that I had the career that I want right now. Like, you know, my screenwriting career was going off, you know, completely, like, you know, very well, you know, or whatever. You know,
What if you had to write movies for Tommy Wiseau?
Oh, I'd love to. As long as I was getting, as long as it was a professional career and I was getting paid for it, I would do it.
Now, in some ways, though, can you say that you're kind of living that dream in
Well,
the sense that you're getting to write? It's just it's not maybe it's not
It's a
making it
one-way
into
That's
street,
the
right?
It's
point.
not making it
That's
into
the
a
kind of
Hollywood
the
production.
wish would be that
Yeah.
it would be a professional, and I would be getting paid some really good money for that.
So
I don't
so
want to
if
be.
you
I
could-
don't need to be
the-
rich.
You could turn it to Joe Esterhausen and lord it over everybody.
So your ideas and stuff you're writing would be fully realized to shared
Yeah,
experiences for other
exactly.
people. It'd be like that
Because
big.
I mean, right now I am writing. Yes, that's wonderful. But like, is this writing going anywhere right now? Not
Yeah.
at the
So you-
not
You'd
like
like to
at
see
the
the full
exact moment.
realization of it.
Yeah.
She wouldn't want to like
Gotcha.
bring Ed Wood back from the dead.
I mean, I've seen like movies and TV shows where they use the wish, and they have the wish of like, I wish my grandpa were here, and the grandpa's been dead for like 20 years, and all of a sudden he's a zombie and coming back.
See,
and
that's
I'm
one of
like,
those. That's one of those classic tropes. You get a wish, you think it's wonderful, but it always bites you in the
And
ass.
see,
Right.
see, I would love to see my grandfather. I wouldn't want to see him in that context. Of
Right, you
course.
wouldn't want to see him as a zombie.
I'd want to see and talk to him with what I know as, because I mean he passed away when I was 16.
Mm-hmm.
So as a 50-some-year-old versus talking to somebody at 16 is totally different with my experiences. But I could harken back to the advice that he gave me back then to what I know now.
And you have your
then-
memories of him.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
So
so
you'll never forget him. You know, but
there is
it-
something to say about having that
having him
emotional
there.
and physical, just that interaction.
And
It's-
that's what dreams are for.
It's an interesting thing, and I don't know if anybody's really explored this. But what if you did have a dream or a wish, and you wished somebody that you loved back to life? They were not a zombie or something horrible. They just came back to life. Now what happens? What did they do? What do you do with them? What, seriously?
I'm sure that's been done as
What?
a
Actually,
smaller
that's a really
film.
good idea.
What the hell can you do? How are you going
Because
to?
how does like in this situation, and we talked about this, like them putting him putting down the social security number and it's
Right.
the locker combination or whatever. How did he get a driver's license?
Yeah, he didn't.
Well, I guess he did it because he didn't need a car. He's in New York, but they don't drive in New York. I guess I don't know. Some people don't.
Most people don't.
Yeah, most people don't. But that's the thing. Like he didn't have a driver's license. He didn't go learn how to drive because he knew he was only there for
You would have to go
6
back to
weeks.
the Social Security Administration and say, "Yeah, there was a mistake. I'm still alive, and good luck getting that. You're not going to get it.
Yeah,
because your number's gone, right?
Your number's
Once it's
gone.
The critical side of me would
Your number's up.
Watching a movie
Literally.
now. If this movie was made now on that type of scene, if that was now, I'd be like, oh, this is garbage because they need to really address the fallout from that stuff like
Yeah.
that. But in this movie, I say this to a lot of people because I watch so many different types of movies. I say, what are the rules that the movie's trying to live by? And if it makes those rules, then I try to play along those lines.
Just as
This
long as it's
movie-
consistent."
Yeah, exactly. And this movie had a fantasy element, so I go into that saying, okay, I'm going to watch it with that in mind.
Like it's not realistic.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. I'm not
And
going to say, okay, well that can't happen because of this. I mean, for
You
crying
have
out loud,
to
he made
suspend your
wish-
disbelief.
Exactly. He made wishes to a machine that he was basically could ride that ride and
Right, and at nowhere in the movie does anybody question how the stupid, crappy unplugged machine is able to grant a wish.
Well,
and
they
then
don't
come
care
back.
about that. That's
Well,
not.
but they should, because that's a whole different universe for all of us.
So
You know
there-
what I mean?
There is a movie, okay, and I don't know, I don't know, or a TV show. There's a TV show that's getting made right now called Zoltar the series.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh
I
my
don't know if
God.
this is real or if this is like a fan film
That's
or
funny.
something, fan series or something like that. But I saw it on the IMDb, going, oh shit! And it's about a terminally ill man who he goes to a Zoltar machine and asks to be a child, to be young again, right? The problem is, he ends up being the son of his child. So now he grows up to be like, he gets to relive his life again, but now as the son of his child in this time period.
But the realistic aspects of Zoltar, it's basically Aladdin. I mean,
Yeah. It's the magic lamp.
Yeah, it's a magic lamp philosophy, and they just use
So,
use it in the.
would
80s.
you guys go back?
So I thought about it, actually. I've thought about it a lot. And, I mean, if it were a temporary thing, and I knew it was a temporary thing, like I wasn't going to be stuck there in this time period, yeah, I'll go back.
For like a week.
Yeah, or
Or
so it's even
vacation.
6 weeks. 6 weeks is plenty of time.
But what if you went back, but you didn't retain your memories? You had to relive it just as you were, not just as, but as a kid, and you didn't have the memories of going back. But then
then you wouldn't want to do it because like the whole point of this thing is that like you know who you are, right? So if you didn't know you were a kid and you were just gonna live it like that, then that would be terrible.
that's an interesting wish. I mean, if you're going near the end of your life and you got the chance to start it all over fresh, but as a completely different person, you're amnesia, you have no idea who you are. You have no idea if you're going to be man or woman, what age you're going to be. You're just not going to be who you are dying. Yeah. I think most people would take that roll of the dice and just say, sure, whatever it is has got to be better than what's going to happen to me in the next 6 months.
So you guys are saying, so what you were saying, that's a whole different thing. The original question, if I heard it right, if I could go back in time and I wouldn't currently today remember what I went back for, I would do it because I know the completeness. If I was going as in my mind as a 50-year-old back to that time period and experiencing those things there, even if I wouldn't remember it, I know that I would feel contentness from what I would want from my life.
You would eventually be coming out of it too.
Yeah, exactly.
You may not know exactly when.
I wouldn't be going back if I was as my age now thinking. If I went back in time to that point, I would not go with the intent of doing something crazy and stuff like that. I would go with the intent of just finding some completeness.
That's why I like Memento.
This is why I like Big, because it has the Zoltar machine, right? So you have to make the wish to begin with, and then you have to make the wish later to come back, right?
So there's that journey of finding.
So yeah, say Josh Baskin became a adult. And then he goes, remember he rides his bike to the fair? What if it was still there? Then the movie would have been over, right? Because he would have just said, I want to be a kid again. I don't want to be an adult. This is not what I wanted. Or he would have made another wish of like, I didn't mean, I wish to be a big. I wish to be, something else.
What if it had made him 12 feet tall instead of an adult?
Well, he was stood out then, huh?
Well, you also made a good point, though, because he just said, I wish to be a kid again. And that could have been any time. And it just brought him back to the time period that he was.
Yeah, that was nice.
That was nice, but it could have gone to, he could have been 5 or something. That would have been funny. That would have been hilarious.
He could have been a baby goat, which is called a kid.
Oh, good Lord. You have a funny genie there doing that.
Yeah, Zoltar's laughing.
See, and
he
me,
is like opening his mouth.
Really be careful what you wish for.
For me, it was like the boy acknowledged he acknowledged Elizabeth Perkins' character, so it's like he still had his memories because he looks back at her or something like that.
Yeah.
So he didn't forget what he learned as an adult, if you will, for that 6 weeks. But and that's got to be a challenge for what would have happened. Where he would have gone.
They both have therapy in their futures.
I kept saying that we were watching. I was like, these people are going to need therapy after this.
It would have been hilarious because she does kind of give her that look when he's a kid. She should have been like, oh my God.
And let's not forget something too. In addition to him learning and stuff, and don't get what you wish for and all that, she learns a lot. She learns to become a much better person. She's no longer the person that she was, like she was with Paul. And as a matter of fact, you could make the argument that the movie is really more kind of about her growth than it is about his, because he
doesn't grow.
Right.
Really.
He ends up going back. He does, but he doesn't. He ends up going back.
Well, he realizes
she's really the one who grows through him by experiencing him.
He grows in one major point. He sees what he has as an adult, but he makes the decision that, hey, I need to be a kid again. And so he does grow in that sense. He makes that decision to go
because
back.
like him as a kid saying he wanted to be big. Maybe he wanted. Maybe the idea was he wanted to be older, right?
He's 50 inches taller.
He wants the privileges of being older.
Right, the privileges of being older is that you're taller, right? Yeah. Supposedly. What if he just said, I wish I were big, and then he was the same height, then he never got his growth spurt. But he's a man, and he's Tom Hanks, but as like a smaller Tom Hanks.
See, that's why they had so many spin-offs of these type of movies, because the idea The vice versa with Judge Reinhold.
Yeah,
18
that's
again
usually the
with
switch
George.
movies.
Yeah,
I like the idea though that Elizabeth Perkins' character does grow, and that's probably what makes me like the movie more, because
Right.
if she had not done that, it would have been a little more cynical, and I probably wouldn't have liked it as much.
If she weren't in the movie, it probably, or like had been sort of the love interest, which a lot of people, and especially you, don't like love interest kind of stuff or whatever, because those are just like kind of,
Meh.
I don't know, meh to you. It's just sort of like that. I love the love interest sort of stuff. I love love. I love people falling in love, seeing that stuff, and seeing their, like that the party scene where they're at the party and he's trying to eat the corn, the little corn things, and then he sees her and like she and him are having a little talk, and it just seems like sort of like you can tell she likes him. He doesn't. He's probably like she's cute, but like she's an adult. Ooh, ick, kind of thing.
That's what his friend had, sort of.
Yeah, his friend was like, oh.
I like growth and change in characters, and I like the fact that when you first meet her, she's comes off sort of as a hard ass, but there's like this little window that there's a real regular person in there, and through him she's able to explore that and become that, and that
Actually,
becomes who she is.
More of the hard ass was put back into it. Originally, it had like a lot less of that hard assness, and stuff. She still had that. She still had the part where she comes into the guy's office, starts talking about that one secretary she wants to get fired or whatever.
It's because she's had all her influence from Paul, who's a big jerk face. Now she gets all her influence from him, and he's a nice kid.
And he's changed her.
He's changed
into a better person.
Right. He is the agent of her change, and I like that. That's the person who ends up growing. That's the person that I end up liking more.
That's a really good. That's a really good point with story wise and screenplays. You don't really see that as much, and you need to, especially like horror films. Horror films, you never see growth like that.
Yeah.
Nobody has time to grow. It's all one. This is why I do not like movies that take place in one day. You cannot grow in one day. I'm sorry. Not like
most of them there is no growth. It's just you're a victim of this person and they die and then they get away with it, and that's it.
If you did a movie like this where there is growth, there is time, all this stuff's like things are happening to the people, but they're growing as they go. That's better story.
It's the traditional hero story, and the hero changes, the hero grows. The hero has to go through whatever challenges they have, but they learn and they grow from it. A lot of these other indie horror movies, especially, you don't really have a hero and you don't really have a growth at all.
You never have anybody to root for.
All you have are victims.
You have the
final girl, but
victims, and all they do is survive.
Yeah, they don't. You look at Alice from Friday the 13th. She didn't really grow. She was there. She was the same person when she got there that she became at the end. She just happened to cut off Mrs. Voorhees'
Ash. Ash grows in the Evil Dead movies.
Well, they
kind of
in Friday 3, the female girl grows a little bit. They try to deal with it. It's not done completely, but with Chris's growth in Friday 13th Part 3, there is some growth, but it's limited in the sense of what, because I mean obviously the movie's more about
once again one night. You can't really grow in just one night, and that's what that. This is why when people are like, you should write a movie that's in one location and taking over a place of one night. I'm like, why? That's a play. That is not a movie. And a lot of plays the people
or Lifeboat.
Yeah, you can have the moment of realization.
But even Lifeboat, they grew. Because they were hating each other at the beginning. They come to like rely on each other by the end. See, that was actually one night or whatever. I think maybe it was a little bit more than one night. But it was like they were stuck there in the middle of the water, and I like that.
You can have a moment of realization, but having growth, it's kind of hard in a one-day experience. It can happen to a degree, but it's you got to build the momentum. You got to have some sort of, maybe there's flashbacks or something that's going to show some transition that's going to be able to make that possible. And that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, well, I think the problem is most of these other horror movies are not about the characters. They're about the killer.
Yeah.
So,
and quote unquote rooting for the killer. Let's see how many people they can kill. Let's see how interesting ways that they kill people, and that's where I don't find it entertaining, because where's the entertainment in that?
I find entertainment in those in a different way. Like I was saying, how I watch movies that set different types of rules and expectations. When I watch a slasher film, if you will, most of those, it's not about that you're trying to get a couple characters to go from this experience to this experience mentally and physically. In the slasher films, it's more about the survival element and stuff like that. So it's a different set of rules, and there is less emotional engagement in a horror film, but it's more about the experience and the high of the physical danger that situation.
I mean, I would argue that in Halloween, Laurie Strode's character definitely develops and definitely goes forward and definitely learns things. She leaves her innocence behind, and she has to deal with a whole bunch of shit that she never had to deal with before.
Didn't take place all in one night.
Didn't take place all in one night, but
so.
that to me is one of the
Couple days.
reasons why I really love that film, because they aren't just one-dimensional victims and that's it. There are some of that in there, but the main character is still heroic in that they start at one place, they have a bunch of shit they have to overcome, they do that, and they're in a different place at the end.
And that's another reason why I like this movie big, because when Tom Hanks, sort of gets more into being an adult, starts doing the adult life, starts becoming the vice president of operations or whatever he is, he all of a sudden, like, he still has the kid, but he's learning how to be an adult.
This is important,
how to do this stuff.
But he's losing himself too.
Yeah,
he's losing who he was.
He's losing the kidness. Yeah. And then there's at one point where he does talk to her, and he's like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. Like, why are you asking me to do this? Like, I don't know what to do. Like, and I was like thinking that's when I think he starts kind of realizing he needs to grow up. He needs to fucking become a kid. Like, there's a reason.
Shit or get off the pot.
There is a reason
Either
why.
be an adult or be a kid.
Right. There is a reason why a kid's, or it starts from baby, goes to child, goes to kid, goes to teen, goes to, there's a structure to life. You can't just say, now there's some kids who are very, very fucking smart, and they can excel quicker, right? They've got the quickly they can excel quickly, and and that becomes the thing. Like, I don't know. Yeah. It's just like some kids are easier to figure that stuff out.
But his character in here, he couldn't go any further, because when she called him out on their relationship, he couldn't process what needed to happen for that to connect with her on that emotional level to make the relationship successful. And she was like, where are we going with this? What are we doing? He couldn't process that because he wasn't at that emotional maturity to be able to do it. Yeah, he got playful about it.
Yeah.
That's all he could do at that moment, because he wasn't mature enough to do it. And that's when...
And she still was okay with it.
Exactly. And he started to realize he started to realize that, hey, I want my childhood back.
But he does have a moment of choice, though, because, at one point where he's talking to her and he says, I have every reason in the world to go back, but I only have one reason to stay, and that's you. I mean, if he really didn't like where he was, he wouldn't have even mentioned that, but he does, because it's there, and it is real.
It is there.
And it is going to cause some pain for him to have to leave that.
Yeah, but she wouldn't, if she really processed, and I know this is a fantasy element, if she really processed that he was a 13-year-old, I don't think that relationship would have lasted.
She has to send him back.
She has to send him back, exactly.
And she's never going to see him again. Like, she's never going to see him again.
She won't see him again in that light until she's at a different stage of life.
Oh, if I were her, I'd never want to see him again. I would just forget that ever happened.
She could, that too. She could still see him in the periphery, but she would probably want to remove herself, because that'd be kind of creepy.
Therapy, like, you're right.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
By the way, I want to point out, you get to see Robert Loggia dance.
Yeah.
So that's
in the extended cut, you get to see him get on his knees and
crouch and move around
like
walk
a duck or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so that was cool. That's he's
that
old
was a little
school
weird.
acting.
I mean,
another discussion we had in here, and Robert Loggia's great, by the way. Yes,
yeah,
he's always great.
Is we mentioned that this movie was remade in the past 5 years, or reimagined, if you will, as a movie called Little. I thought about it, and I've seen it. It's okay.
It's okay.
But
It's got
but
moments.
that movie's flipped. It's basically she's an adult and she becomes a kid.
And it's funny because it's
different.
It's race swapped and gender swapped.
Yes.
So it's the
and
idea
it's
of
in present day.
in present day, and so it's like
It's reverse big.
yeah, it's reverse big. Absolutely reverse
It's
big.
Gib.
Yeah.
And,
Gib.
Yep, Gib. And so basically, what happens is this girl is a what is it? She
She's
works
like
at a music
executive
place.
or something.
Yeah, executive music person or something.
Executive of some kind. Yeah.
And then she ends up never really totally explains what she does.
I can't.
But she ends up going back. I guess some little kid does a wish to her and says, "I wish you were little," and everything. And so she's like, "Whatever." Next day she wakes up, she's little, and she's like a kid again. So her assistant has to put her into school. She can't work, like she can't do all this stuff. There is a weird thing where she's like hitting on the teacher or whatever, and the teacher's like, "Whoa, get away."
There's also another guy that's
not
involved
interested in that.
There's an older guy too. And so there are some elements in it, but I mean it completely takes the core themes of what Big is, and it takes it in its own.
It'd be interesting if there was a movie.
It's almost like a whole different idea.
If a movie like where a comet comes over and all the children of the Earth become adults and all the adults become children, and everybody swaps for a month. That would be interesting.
I mean, it'd be
That'd
too
be
much though.
chaos.
It'd be chaos. It'd be too much. Maybe a series or something, because I don't think for one movie of that's just way too much stuff that could happen. That would
At
be
first,
fun.
you were saying the kids. I was like, well, the kids take over and like Children of the Corn, but I was like, that's a whole different.
Or
idea.
Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, Lord of the Flies, or
We're going to do that on Film Freaks at some point.
Yeah.
there's also another one where the kids and adults swap. But yeah, so
There's just so many. Like we were talking about how we went with French Connection. They were watching the French Connection. We did that for Film Freaks. So there's most of the time we talk about stuff. We're like, hey, we're gonna do that for Film Freaks at some point. We did Goonies right already.
we talked about it on one of the.
Did we do Goonies?
I don't know if it was part of Film Freaks, but
No, it was Hollywood
Boulevard.
Boulevard. So we did Hollywood Boulevard. We did Goonies, but
yeah. Another thing we were talking here was like. Everybody's like, "What's your favorite Tom Hanks movie?" And it was just like, and each one of us came up with a different answer. And I think we're all thinking in the comedic type of ideas because we're in that realm because he's done so many great dramas in from the '90s on for the most part. But
yeah,
in the '80s, it was like I think you said this one was probably your.
This is
favorite
my
comedy.
favorite. I mean, I do love Forrest Gump's good, but and things like that. I did just watch A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Mr. Rogers
Excellent
one,
film.
and that was
Yeah.
a tearjerker. Holy crap!
And you got, like,
Very
the,
sweet.
You got like the Burbs and stuff like that, which was
Yeah.
great. And I think for you, comedy wise, you said Splash.
Splash.
And then for me, I was like Bachelor Party. So it was like, but that's just the comedy stuff because he's done so many great dramas and all that stuff. I mean,
You said also Joe versus the volcano.
I know,
which I think you might have a little bit of kinship with your name
Well,
there.
yeah. So, but I'd say is obviously he's done some dramatic roles that probably even supersede this. But this is different because
I do like his comedies. Like I like You've Got Mail and
Yes.
and then there's Saving Private Ryan. There's tons of
Road to Perdition. That's a
Road
that's
to
a powerful
Perdition
film.
and I mean he's been in so many good
Green
movies.
Mile.
Not Shawshank.
Green Mile. Was the
No,
one he
Green
did
Mile,
those-
yeah. But so back to Stephen King.
I know, right?
But yeah, and it's so funny because like Anne Spielberg, Steven Spielberg's sister, wrote this movie. She hasn't really written and whatnot many movies, but I'm like, why not? Like she and Gary Ross did a fantastic job, and if you listen to the commentary that's on this Blu-ray, you can actually hear, their like tapes from their session of like brainstorming session where they were just chat about we should do this and they actually have a brainstorming session of the most famous scene in the movie, the what is it, the piano, the
That's
big piano.
actually just magic to me.
Kind of a shame because Gen Z, probably even millennials, they grew up without an FAO Schwartz, so they don't they don't have the same context.
I mean, I was a millennial, so I bet there was one, just wasn't anywhere around Williamsburg. You know, we didn't have. I don't think we had any of those. So.
I remember going to the toy store and playing with like, for me it was Transformers and those Star Wars figures and stuff like
the
that.
The toy stores I had at least was like Toys R Us and KB, so there wasn't really
Buy me toys.
You know, there wasn't a Buy Me Toys. There wasn't FAO shorts or whatever. You know, so there wasn't those things, but it was or we had Roses. Do you remember that thing? That had
It's
a
like
lot
a
of
department
toys.
store.
So yeah, and it had a lot of toys in it too. That's where I would get my Sega Game Gear games and shit. You know.
But they had that in here. They had the piano thing laid out perfectly, and the shot is just absolutely brilliant. Where it's like you see them moving along, they don't even have to change the angle at times because it's like, they do change it, but it's like they have that one shot where it's like they're on each end of the screens, and it's like they're going back and forth, and it's lighting up, and that's just the sheer joy of childhood.
Do you know what the next after Gen Z? Do you know what the next gen is? Next generation, Generation Alpha. Do you know what the next generation after Generation Alpha is?
Beta.
Beta, which is really weird because they're like,
I was thinking big, Generation
no,
Big.
No, Generation Beta, which would be really funny because then that means are they lesser than the Alphas there? Or are they?
What is it, Animal House?
I don't know. But anyway, my point with that being is that we're gonna have a group of kids now that don't even know department stores. They're not gonna know. All these stores are going away, and we're getting just Amazon and all these other things. I mean, when they look at this movie right here, it's a time capsule, man.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just so glad movies like this exist because you can look back at it and say, "Oh my God, what is that?" Like that. I've never been in FAO shorts, but like now that I've watched this movie, I feel like I have, because I mean they show you the whole store and. In the extended cut you get a little bit more, but like the scene where he's like he takes the airplane and like takes it from all the kids and starts, they're like, hey, that's not fair, because he's like freaking taller than them.
Yeah. Well, that's what they did in the 80s. They harken back to the older times with some of those things, like the beginning Christmas Story. They have like the window, and they have the toys, the train sets and stuff like that. I know that's taking place in the 40s, but there's that. I'm thinking in Gremlins where they have all the toys that are out when or Gizmo and all that's driving around in the cars and stuff like that. So.
All right, so what are our final thoughts of this movie? So, Paul, you it's been a while since you'd seen it and everything, and you said before that you were happy that you saw it right again.
Itch scratched.
What?
Itch scratched.
Your itch for it. So you won't need it for another 40 years.
Something like that.
So if you watch it like as a think of it in, like, for me, I was like 15-year-old me absolutely loves it in just a child fun sort of way, no questions asked. 50-year-old me, like, it's like, oh, there's questions, but I don't care because the 15-year-old me takes over. So
Right.
that's the way I sort of look at this movie.
So you become the kid again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
Because then-
watching this kid, I get enjoying it, and it's like I don't have to worry about, oh, there's going to be people getting killed or this or that happening, all this violence and mayhem that we deal with in present day stuff.
Well, it's really funny because, like, it's movies like this or Princess Bride
Yeah.
or whatever that I can just put on a day that I'm feeling sick or something. Some people, Star Wars. I've heard, like, some people say, like, the original Star Wars movie.
That one helps me.
Or Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever.
Back to the Future does.
Back
for
to the
me.
Future. You watch that on a day that you're feeling sick and you just need something to,
Yeah.
like, comfort you.
Yep.
And this is, to me, this is a comfort movie.
Yeah, you can doze off and you wake up 45 minutes later and you can pick up right where it's going, word for word, line for line.
I'm happy with the extended cut, but I won't need to watch it again.
I don't remember. I don't remember it scene for scene, this movie, but it's like from the first time I was watching it. But this time now, it's like seeing some of these extra stuff is like, yeah, it seems like it needs to be trimmed a little bit.
Yeah, it trimmed a lot, actually.
And I'm sure that has to do with the because the memorable scenes were all still there. I was like, boom, that I remember that.
And
that,
I don't think any of the scenes that they put in, none of them were memorable enough that I was like, man, I wish they kept that in. I mean, there was the tummy ache scene
called
where
Pepto-Bismol. He still called his mom.
Called his mommy a tummy ache, and he had to ask her, but he asked her as like a conducting a survey or whatever. What would you give to your child if he had a tummy ache? And because he doesn't know these things, you know.
So it gives further context, but I
But
don't
he
think
didn't. Do we need that scene?
I don't
No.
think those scenes was do or die to the
plot.
to the forward momentum and closure of the film. So
All in all, this is a movie that no matter what I'll watch and love, and I was very glad. Like I picked this because the last one I was doing, Boondock Saints, you said you had no interest in that or something, and then Paul watched it, and then John Ward never seen it, and then watched it before and hated it. So that was an interesting thing.
I thought that was a good movie. It's just something I couldn't really talk about. Probably it just wasn't that much communication on.
But this movie, I mean, because we've all kind of experienced this.
To me, this is nostalgic comfort food.
And there's also something to be said.
Yes.
There's more stuff to talk about in this. So, all right. Well, we will be back with more Film Freaks in next year. So we won't be back till I think January or March of next year. But this is it. We're very glad you guys joined us on this epic journey so far. And we're excited. So there'll be other shows still happening, but just this one's taking a little bit of a backseat. So get ready for more stuff from Indie Film Cafe. But until then, everybody, have a good one. Bye.
Large floppy horse penises.
All right.
Now that's big.
That's big. See,
Do you think that I know you're gonna pause it, but see where I am, and there's a little bit of space on his side versus mine.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll fix it.
That's
We'll
because
fix
I'm
it.
big. See, if Trump were in office, you could have called this Bigly.
Bigly.
All right, we're done.
It's huge.
Hugely.
Isn't that what he says? Huge.
Huge. But he doesn't have Coke. He has Dr. Pepper.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, I would have got a cherry Coke, but they are all out at the fucking 7-Eleven.
Fucking 7-Eleven.
Fucking 7-Eleven. All right.
Blasphemy.
Love you guys.
It seemed like you were getting the antsies.